Ladies and gentlemen, Rotogrinders, welcome back to the Blitz, week 10. My name is Alex Dunlap. You can find me on Twitter at RosterWatch. You can hear Roster Watch on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and the Roster Watch podcast. You can find all of my content over at rosterwatch.com. Of course, this is the Blitz show, and the creator of the Blitz, the curator, the provider, the purveyor, the maniac behind the projection system is Derek Carty. You can find him on Twitter at Derek Carty. You can find the Blitz projection system, which is basically the fourth host of this show, at rotogrinders.com/the-blitz. Last week, Derek Carty used the Blitz against us in the 5-man. And Carty, did you win every head-to-head that you played last week?
I had a really good week. I played, I think, the lineup that you played, Blender, that like everybody had. But I played Jacobs instead of Etienne, and I just went with a cheaper defense. I played the Jets, and it just smashed.
I can't believe that you lost a single head. I guess you played just such massive volume. You might have lost one or two.
Or no, I played Mixon rather.
Mixon. I was gonna say it was Mixon in there. There was the nuclear bomb.
No,
so yeah, the Blitz definitely going hot right now. Again, you can find it at rotogrinders.com/the-blitz. Also joining us once again, our regular fill-in co-host here. It is Blender. His name's Jordan Cooper. You can find him on Twitter at BlenderHD. You can hear him on the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports podcast, and you can buy various products that he has that are going to help you with your DFS game. You can find all that stuff there on his Twitter page at BlenderHD, and across all of the Rotogrinders. He's on every show. Blender. He's filling in for our guy, Chief Justice 06. Thanks so much to Dean. Dean 78904 for filling in for me last week, but happy to be back here this week for week 10. Of course, as always, on the Blitz, we'll go through all the different positions in case you're watching it for the first time. I know we've been freed from behind the paywall for this week, so hello to all of the new watchers. We'll go through running back. We'll go through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. We'll also go through our favorite stacks. Then we will have our conviction and consequences segment where we'll talk about our conviction plays on the slate and also deal out our consequences for last week's loser in the 5-man, which was Chief Justice 06. Of course, Derek Carty was the big winner.
He's hiding from us. He's so ashamed. That's why he didn't show up.
So it's his second week getting dealt a quarterback from us. That's your for anybody new watching. That is your penalty for losing in the 5-man, coming in last place. So we will do that for him. But first, guys, just want to get your 30,000-foot views on the slate. Of course, Derek Carty, usually more of a cash game mind. The Blitz, is a play the best plays kind of tool. Blender is more of a who cares who the hell you play kind of guy, more of a game theory and tournament style. So it's always good to hear these guys bouncing ideas off of one another. So 30,000-foot view on the slate, boys. Carty, let's start out with you. Let's say I'm in town and I'm as sick as I am right now, and I walk up to you and I cough all over your face, slap you across the nose, come into your house, grab your cat by the tail. Say, Carty, how the hell am I going to win a DFS this week? What are you going to tell me?
I'm going to tell you, I really don't have a great idea. Like it's kind of a bad slate in that the pieces don't really fit that well together. There's not a lot of value, and the value that we do have is at a crappy position. Like we have two really cheap, good tight ends. So like, I'm entertaining ideas of like playing both of them, like a 2 tight end week. And that just feels gross. And like, there's not a lot of clarity on this slate. And even in GPPs, like I think it's probably a really good week for GPPs. I want to know what Blender says, but like, we don't have a lot of games that we feel really confident are going to like smash. So like, it could be a week where like grosser games are, the vomit stacks are back in play. And I think the field is going to be very confident on certain guys and overconfident. We saw Justin Fields smash last week. Like, is he going to be over-owned in GPPs this week? And that kind of stuff. So it's really kind of a weird week. I don't love it, but especially for cash, it feels gross.
Well, we got the king. Thankfully, we have the king of the vomit stacks here. Whenever Cardi in a week where he said, my least 5 favorite words in basically the world. Was that 5 words? 2 tight ends in cash. Yeah, I think so. Basically, my least favorite 5 words is Cardi. It looks like we have a picture of Cardi there. Look at Cardi in that photo, all dressed up, looking super nice on some.
He
Awesome,
doesn't dress up for us, Alex.
Some kind of. Oh yeah, man. But it didn't like we dress up too well for him either, though, right, Blender? What do you think, though, brother? Like your overall view on the slate? Is it like Cardi said? I mean, do you like it for GPPs in a week like this where we're just struggling for cash and trying to plug in up suboptimal plays just to get up to certain other guys?
Oh, I think it's one of the best GPP weeks of the season so far.
Okay, well,
I mean, this is
about it.
Yeah. Cash. We'll get into cash. I think the double tight end build is all based around your priority on Tyreek Hill at 9,100 in the wide receiver spot. But for GPP, so understand that the best plays, okay, we're going to team the best plays are meh. Are like they're underpriced by $400. I mean, like there's not much inefficiency on this slate. So the little inefficiencies that we have make one guy slightly better than another guy, but the ownership is not going to reflect that. So like we'll talk about Dameon Pierce, we'll talk about Justin Fields, we'll talk about Foster Moreau and Tyreek Hill. The difference between the best play and the 5th best play is quite marginal. And the difference between the 5th best play and the 12th best play is also quite marginal. So this is the type of slate where you shouldn't. I would say, out of all the weeks of the year, there's literally no like. I never think there's a must play, but there's literally no like if you were to take your cash lineup and say I'm not going to play any of these guys in GPP. I think that's perfectly fine. Like you can make so many lineups in a certain projection range that's probably 7 to 10 points off the optimal. That includes like 86 different players. So because of that, be more inclined to fade chalky players. Remember, if they hit their median, if Dameon Pierce gets 18 points, you're not dead, right? If he gets 35, you're dead. So it's like, from a median perspective, don't get so tied to that. I have no problem giving up 15 points in median projection this late for the sake of correlation and low ownership, because the difference between these guys is, I'm going through. You don't like any lineup that you play. Like it's one of those weeks where you literally don't like any lineup that you play, but everyone is in that situation. So the sharper players know how to take advantage of that uncomfortability. Where it's like, well, I don't have Dameon Pierce. I don't have Tyreek Hill in my lineup. I don't have Kamara. I don't have Fields. I don't have Amon-Ra. I don't have a cheap tight. I'm playing $40K for a tight end. Should I be playing this lineup? It's like, dude, your lineup only projects for a couple of points lower than anyone else's lineup. Take some uncomfortability. And of course, I'm going to say this, and then all the chalk's going to smash. But I mean, like, that should be your approach. It's not like these past slates where we get Pollard at 2,000 too cheap and Ramondre at too cheap, and we have 17 running backs that are underpriced. Like, this is a slate where, dude, legitimately play 2 tight ends in cash, and that may actually be optimal. That shows how efficiently priced most of this slate is.
I hate the whole 2 tight end thing, but we'll talk about it. But I mean, I understand where you guys are coming from. Like I put together my first iteration of my cash lineup for the 5-man, and I hate it. So hopefully, I don't ever look at the Blitz before the show. So hopefully Cardi will come here with some answers. Blender will have some good tips. Let's just get the show started, boys. And we'll start at the quarterback spot. Cardi, Blender mentioned it earlier. So let's just start with the elephant in the room. What about Justin Fields? He's now up to 6,500 on DraftKings. This was a guy up until 2-3. I mean, honestly, probably 2 weeks ago, a lot of people didn't really trust him. 3 weeks ago, most people didn't trust him. Now it's everybody has all the trust in the world, but it does come at a really good time because it's against the Lions. And if you close your eyes and you see how this thing's going to run out, it's objectively like one of the best spots that he could be in. Is the Blitz getting to Justin Fields? He's 6,500 now, and there's some other options that are here a little bit cheaper that I'm sure we'll get to on a week wherever, an extra $1,000 can make a pretty big difference in some of your other positions. What do you think? It's like if you're running 10 optimals, how many of these are going to be getting Justin Fields right now?
You're probably getting like 70-30 or 60-40 Mahomes and Fields.
Okay, so you're not so the Blitz isn't going down for any kind of
these others. If you run 100, maybe you'll get a handful of like Ellinger or Jacoby Brissett or something like that. I'm not going that way. I mean, they are theoretically from a value standpoint like kind of viable, but I think it's really the decision is Fields or Mahomes. And given that most people are going to have Fields in cash, I think, because everyone loves to overreact, and he's been smashing and he broke records last week and everything. Like he's going to be so owned in cash. I would rather play the Fields type of lineups than the Mahomes ones. But like Fields is not as good as everyone thinks he is. Like a lot of this is recency bias. Like he's good. Like he runs. They're finally giving him some designed runs, but we've seen it twice. We saw it 3 weeks ago. He got like 30% of the design runs. 2 weeks ago, he went back to his normal like 10%. And then last week, he was up to 20%. So like, we don't even know for sure that this is their game plan because it's been staggered. Like 2 weeks ago, they didn't give him those design runs that they've been giving him the weeks he's done really well. He was also great with the scrambling last week. Played a very man coverage heavy team and did a lot of scrambling. And he's facing another man coverage heavy team in the Lions this week. So I like Fields. Like I think there is massive rushing upside, but I do think people are going to be overrating what that upside is and his chance of getting there. So in cash, yeah, love Fields. In GPPs, I really don't like Fields that much, especially like Chicago stacks, like full Chicago stacks project terribly, even though Fields himself projects well.
And is that because the full stacks project here? Would that be considering maybe a stack with Fields and one of the runners? I mean, we'll talk about these runners, but they have really good matchups too. Would there be any thought of maybe stacking them with one of his runners just to in case
the
this
problem is now they're like, we don't have Montgomery getting 85% of the work the way he was like in week 1. Like they're giving Herbert more. They have Claypool in the mix now, so like there's just more competition for targets. And they run so much to begin with. Like as if you're talking about pass catchers, like double stacking pass catchers with Fields feels pretty gross because they're not going to throw that much.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So yeah, like I like him individually as a cash play. I think getting up to Mahomes is perfectly viable. If the ownership was going to be even between Mahomes and Fields, I might actually lean playing Mahomes. But the way I think it's going to break down, I think I probably am just going to find a Fields lineup.
Blender, what do you think? So it feels like the Blitz is going to be all over Fields and all over Mahomes, right? As far as its optimal plays, but only Tua is $200 more than Fields, and I just don't think that many people are going to be on him just because with Tua, what it's been when he was a little bit cheaper and when Jalen Waddle was a little bit cheaper, you could stack all those guys, and you got the really easy stack there. If you've tried putting that thing together this week, that it's really, really hard to make the other pieces work. So I think that'll take some ownership off Tua. Are you into Tua this week? What are you thinking about quarterbacks? Do you like the whole Fields, Mahomes stuff for tournaments? Like, what are your general thoughts?
Well, in cash games, you definitely play Fields over Tua just because the rushing projection. I mean, his rushing yard prop is 59.5. I mean, if he gets 60 yards rushing, that's a touchdown and a half passing. So, like, why not just take that? So, in DraftKings, I think it's Fields or Mahomes, and on Fanduel, you're just playing Mahomes because Mahomes is only like 200.
Oh, we should have mentioned that, right?
More than Fields.
Yep.
So, like, just Mahomes is the best play on the slate because Josh Allen ain't on the slate anymore. He's not going to play.
Yeah.
For GPP, I prefer all the cheap guys. It's vomit stack season, baby.
Okay,
season.
so then let's talk about the cheap guys. Because whenever you get down here, who do you consider, like, who do you favor? Do you like Daniel Jones? I mean, I've heard, Trevor Lawrence is one that's in a really good game environment with a high total, an easy pairing partner with Christian Kirk. Cardi mentioned Jacoby Brissett, who was popping in some of our models over at Roster Watch, which I just thought was so weird. And look at him, Blender. Why do you always like the weird
the
stuff,
top
dog?
quarterback on the slate to me, baby.
Okay.
Jacoby Brissett plus Cooper / Peoples-Jones plus Bryant. It's a way to play chalk Tyreek Hill and not worry about Tyreek Hill's ownership, right? So, like, do I want to play? You can't. How the hell do you pay for 2 double stacks on the slate? The pricing is just too tight for that. So you're really giving up so much in the rest of your lineup. So I need to find salary relief somewhere. I also like Trevor Lawrence, and hear me out on this. Build a lineup with Patrick Mahomes stacks. Okay, so you're going to build a lineup that's something like Mahomes, Juju, Kelsey, or something. You plug in Christian Kirk there as the run back. Now take out Mahomes and put in
Lawrence. I swear to God, I did that earlier.
Deeper.
Yeah.
Because you'll win. Let's say Mahomes puts up 28 points, 30 points, and Lawrence puts up 24. You still have the same game, but you save $2,500 in salary that you could use in another spot to get up to Saquon or Derrick Henry or something like that in your running back spot, and they have a ceiling game. So I think Mahomes stacks are tough this week to fit in. I think people will try. And I'm not opposed. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I think I'm more likely to just go Mahomes Kelsey and not worry about the wide receivers. Maybe you throw an MVS because he's cheaper. But I prefer the Lawrence side just because you just save money on quarterback. I don't think this is a week based on the totals of these games. I don't think so. From a probability standpoint, is it going to happen? I have no idea. That quarterback is going to make or break this late. I think the highest scoring quarterback may have 28 points, and most quarterbacks will be somewhere in the 18 to 24 range. And it's really not going to come down to what quarterback you played. So that's why I want to throw in stuff. I want to play Case Keenum with Stephon Diggs. I want to play Kenny Pickett stacks, right? I don't mind that. Here's one that doesn't seem like it should be off the board, but I think is way lower owned. This game is way lower owned. Dak Prescott at 6,600 because he's like right in the middle. It's like, why play Prescott when you can play Fields or Tua? So Dak Prescott's ownership is probably very low. And why can't you just pair him up with Dalton Schultz and CeeDee Lamb? You don't even have to worry about the Green Bay run back, and maybe they just run him over. And it's all through the passing game. It's less probability, but Prescott, Lamb, Schultz, ownership-wise, like, dude, you can do anything you want with the rest of your lineup. And it's not like you're playing garbage, right? You're playing Dak Prescott. You're playing CeeDee Lamb. You're playing Dalton Schultz. This isn't like you're not playing Kenny Pickett and you're not playing some of these. You're not playing John Wolford, right? You're playing real people here. So, I'm looking more into those. I'm not going to play Sam Ehlinger. I don't care what his projection is.
So you're not doing that, even though,
no, I'm playing the other Cardi. I'm playing the dude. At some point, I'm going to win money with Derek Carr. Is it going to be this week?
I love the Carr side. I like it more than the Indy side, but I don't know. It's been 2 weeks where Ehlinger's been bad, and I don't know. He's cheap. He theoretically has rushing upside. Where he's throwing the ball.
We just haven't seen it from Sam, though, man. I've been disappointed with the lack of rushing from him, especially given how bad the offense is struggled. To me, I thought the whole time that Ehlinger was going to be a guy that if they were struggling, he's the type of person who would just want to take the game on his own back and put it on his shoulders and just run with the football. And he really hasn't. It'll be interesting to see if that changes with this. It's hard to bind anything with those Colts with what's going on with them right now, though, for sure. Hey, look, we'll get to tight end. You mentioned Schultz earlier, Blender, and we'll get to tight end. But Carter, you said earlier that there's 2 really good tight ends. So is that Dulcich and Schultz for you, or is that
Moreau?
Okay, so it's
Dulcich and Moreau, but I do think Schultz is actually Dulcich and Moreau are going to get the most ownership, but Schultz is almost as good of a play as them, and he's not going to get the ownership. So I like him a lot, and then certainly I think a Dallas stack like that is viable.
Okay, and we'll talk about tight ends whenever we get there. But I think Blender talked about most of the guys that he liked. One guy I haven't heard anybody mention is Case Keenum. so Cardi, I don't know if you want to talk about Case Keenum.
Blender mentioned him. Blender
Yeah, I
said he
mentioned
could play Keenum and Diggs.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry, man.
Cardi, I have a question for you about Keenum.
Mm-hmm.
How much, like, I know you're going to have to project him, not like Josh Allen, but I think the real question is, how much is the Buffalo offense going to change from a play calling perspective with Keenum behind center versus Josh Allen? If you tell me they're going to throw 80% of the time, yes, Keenum is obviously going to be less efficient than Josh Allen, obviously not going to run the ball and scramble as much as Josh Allen. But if it's going to be 75, 80% pass, like, why the hell wouldn't I want to play a 5K quarterback that's going to throw the ball 40 plus times?
So I think that's a really interesting question, and one that I wish I had a better answer for, because Buffalo obviously is so pass heavy. They've thrown the ball like 20% more than league average this year, which is like easily, like, once you adjust for context, like they're like the most pass heavy team in football. Generally, when a team plays a backup has to go to a backup quarterback, it drops by 3%. So they go from 20% to 17% or like whatever. But it's not an average situation. It is a team that's at the extreme, and it's going from Josh Allen, who's like maybe the best quarterback in football, to a backup. So like, I was pretty aggressive. I knocked it down. I think I have the Bills, instead of being like, that 17% or whatever, they're more like 7% above average passing right now. But if they are that 17, like, then Case Keenum, could smash at this price. So like, I do see the upside there for sure.
Hey, Cardi, you always say in the Minnesota games, I'm not sure as much in Buffalo. I don't have the pace stuff pulled up. Was this projected to be a fast-paced game with Josh Allen?
Let me take a look. Yeah, that's the second fastest paced game on the slate.
So does Keenum change that?
Not really. A lot of pace comes down to play calling. Quarterback's involved a little bit, but it still projects fast.
Keenum's never been the type of quarterback who's going to go back there and just survey the field and take that play clock all the way down to zero anyway, man. He's a snap it and get it out of his hands kind of guy. So so Cardi, Blender talked about the guys that he liked. So besides, like, who does the Blitz see like on the periphery of being playable? Like, after we talk about Mahomes and Fields, who it feels like it likes best and is kind of jamming into the optimals, can you just kind of give not a ranking, but just plays that you think are acceptable at the quarterback? Because the Blitz wouldn't laugh you out of the room for playing some of these guys.
I mean, in cash, I really don't think there's anyone else you'd want to play. If you want to go down and go real cheap, Ellinger, Brissett, Daniel Jones, Trevor Lawrence, like, fine. I wouldn't do it though. In GPPs, yeah, like I think any of those guys as part of like vomit stacks are good. Derek Carr in Vegas stacks, I think, is good. That's the kind of thing that if once you get past kind of the obvious guys, those are the ones that look the most appealing to me in tournaments.
All right, let's move on to running backs, boys. And we'll start out at the very top here. Just Cardi, is the Blitz getting any Saquon Barkley and just the best in the number one matchup of the week for opposing running backs?
No, it likes Henry more straight up, and he's cheaper. So if you're going to pay all the way up at running back, Henry is the guy that I would do it with.
The year of our Lord, 2022, and the Blitz likes Derrick Henry better than Saquon Barkley. I mean,
the Blitz always likes Henry more than other like mathematical systems. It just doesn't like him as much as the public seems to, because the public is just irrational. But Henry is good, and he's actually involved a little bit more in the pass game this year, and he gets such a high percentage of the rushing. Like, he's like the only bell cow running back in football at this point, basically. That's not true. Like, there are a couple others. But he gets like 95% of the carries, and that's a huge number. Nobody really does that. And and it's a decent matchup, and it's just he projects well.
So Barkley's up here at like 8,600 on DraftKings, and as you go down, it feels like besides Derrick Henry, I don't think anybody will play. Not many people will play Nick Chubb. Hardly anybody will play Dalvin on DraftKings. I will say on FanDuel, I was messing around over there. Dalvin Cook feels a lot better.
Nick Chubb is $8,100. Oh my God!
He's so far off your radar that you didn't even know
Like
his price.
I don't play 6,000. Like
yeah, dude. Well, I mean, it's at Miami. Miami's been a team like, and we'll talk about it whenever we get to stacks. But this is one that I've been eyeing as one that I think could be a good back and forth kind of game. As far as those factors. But then you got Jonathan Taylor. People after a couple bad games from Josh Jacobs, I'm not sure if they're gonna go back to him, even though objectively it feels like probably a pretty good spot. Jonathan Taylor is in just an epic spot, and he's off the injury report. Talk about a better buy on Fanduel. I mean, over on Fanduel, it's almost hard to get away from Jonathan Taylor. But I feel like this area is where we're going to need to talk. And correct me if I'm wrong, Cardi. Like I said, I haven't looked at the Blitz, but I'll bet you the Blitz likes Kamara at 7,400. I'll bet you it likes Travis Etienne at 7,100. I know it likes Dameon Pierce is 6,300, and I guess I don't think it's going to like Jamal Williams. I'm just trying to see. Oh, do you know who the Blitz is going to like? It's going to like Najee Harris at 5,500 somehow, isn't it? Like what? Am I right? Like, am I on to like?
The first few guys you mentioned are the guys the Blitz likes the most for sure. Like Dameon Pierce is the best play on the slate. Like. He's underpriced. Like, I don't know why his price isn't going up. I said Henry's like one of the only bell cows in football. Dameon Pierce is like one of the others. There's like 3 or 4 of them. And Dameon Pierce has been getting like 90% of the carries, like 10% of the targets. He plays for the Texans, and the Texans suck, but they're playing the Giants. The Giants suck too. And he's super cheap, and you have to play Dameon Pierce in cash games.
Blender, here's the thing, and I've been screaming about Dameon Pierce ever since the Senior Bowl, saying, you guys, like, he's better than Brian Robinson, and that's been completely true. But do you worry at all in tournaments about Dameon Pierce, not only the ownership, but also the fact that it's a road underdog. And if you just look, I hate to look at game logs, but I mean, he's only ever been over 20 fantasy points twice this season.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Alex.
Okay.
I'm dancing. I'm dancing to the EV. I'm dancing to the EV bank. I'm going to get all my Slancy bucks on Sunday. I think running back is by far the best place to get contrarian this week. By far. Yeah. Okay. People are used to, they have 2017 football brain when we had David Johnson and whoever and Le'Veon Bell, right? McCaffrey and LaDainian Tomlinson. You want to go all the way back, right? Running back variance is all touchdown dependent. Okay. And ceilings for running backs are primarily tied to touchdowns. Okay. So what you say about Pierce is like, yeah, he from a median perspective, he's playing cash. Okay, I get it. Okay, you're fine, right? But they're a road underdog with an 18 point.
Is he going to score 5 touchdowns this week? Probably not.
Right. So I take a look at these guys that in these situations, like, does Henry and Barkley have ceilings? Yes. But I mean, why not Josh Jacobs at 7,600 against the Colts? Like, I take a look at, especially on a tight slate, right? We have very tight pricing, and people are going to spend up at running back. But remember, this is a position that is very dependent on touchdowns for variance. Wide receivers, especially higher end wide receivers, are not subject to variance as much because they earn their targets, as opposed to care that much about field position. So, like, the range, I'm going to be playing tons. I mean, the running backs that I'm playing, people are going to look at me like, well, some of them you may not, but my favorite running back play on the entire slate is Jeff Wilson Jr. And it's going to be like,
pretty well.
What?
Yeah.
Jeff Wilson Jr.
He's your favorite play on the slate?
Favorite play on the entire slate because he's direct leverage off of Tua Hill lineups, and he busts them with touchdowns, and he's also leverage off of Dameon Pierce at a low running back price range. So to me, I like Jeff Wilson. I like Jamal Williams.
I don't even know how much he costs. What does he cost? I don't even know.
5,500.
Yeah.
Okay.
Najee Harris is in that same range.
Najee Harris. I like David
Singletary.
Montgomery at 6K off of Fields.
Yeah.
Like, all I need are touchdowns. If I'm going to play anyone on this slate that's upper end, I want to play Henry, I want to play Barkley, and I want to play Jacobs.
Yep.
Right? On FanDuel, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Jonathan Taylor. Although I don't mind Jonathan Taylor on DraftKings at 7,500 as much. I prefer Jonathan Taylor in my Vegas lineups. Like, instead of playing Taylor on his own, I'll play Taylor in a Carr, Adams, Moreau stack, do something like that. But if I could find 20 points, 18 to 20 points out of these 5K guys, all they have to do is fall in the end zone, maybe twice. But these are all the guys that, like, dude, Jamal Williams gets all these goal line carries, right? David Montgomery is going to be getting goal line carries. Jeff Wilson Jr., it's a pass to Tyreek Hill in the end zone, pass interference, first and goal on the 1, and Jeff Wilson falls in the end zone. Like, that's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for 100 yards in the rushing bonus. I just want one of these guys, because it's quite possible I don't play 3 running backs in my builds. I play one of Henry, Barkley, or Jacobs, and then alongside one of these range guys that are going to be probably, 5% owned? And now I have the money. I pay down a tight end. I have a vomit stack in there already, a quarterback. And now I could play Adams and Jefferson. I could play these 7K and 8K receivers that no one else could play because they're jamming in 7K running backs, or they're playing Tua, Fields, or Mahomes lineups. Like, to me, that's the range of ownership you should be looking for, especially on a slate where most of the pricing is efficient. So my lineups, although they look like, oh my God, you're playing Jeff Wilson in your lineup. Oh my God, you're playing Jacoby Brissett stacks with Jeff Wilson, and you're playing Jamal Williams, and you're playing Derrick Henry. And it's like, dude, I'll get a Derrick Henry 45 burger. And then now I could look at wide receiver and go, okay, let me get Adams 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Let me also get Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs with 120 yards and a touchdown. Like, you can't access those types of lineups without being uncomfortable. And if you run them through the Blitz, the lineups that you like on this slate and that lineup is only like a 4-point difference in median. So, like, why not when it's going to be half the ownership? To me, it is an easy game.
Yeah, those like 5,500 or so running backs, like they're not guys you're playing in cash. They're not the best plays.
Devin Singletary's in that
project pretty decently, especially relative to their ownership. They project really well.
Devin Singletary's in that group too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially on Fanduel. I think Singletary's actually a cash guy.
Yeah, Singletary's going to be. I think Singletary and Taylor will be much higher owned on FanDuel for their prices than on DraftKings.
On Jonathan Taylor's 500 cheaper on FanDuel, almost 4% of your salary cap cheaper on FanDuel, which can certainly go a long way in a week like this. We're not going down any farther than that, mid 50. I mean, I'm just looking here, Cardi. Like, does the Blitz like anybody that's a super cheapy? I'm just looking down here. I can't see the Blitz liking. I can't see the Blitz liking any of these guys. I'm just trying to. It's not going to like any of them.
5K guys that it likes. I mean, it's not going to dig into the 4s to play Dontrell Hilliard or Rex Burkhead though. Like,
right.
There's nobody like that.
So once you get down to 5,500 with the Najee Harris, Jeff Wilson Jr. stuff, Singletary's 5,600. It feels like those are kind of the guys that it would go to. I hate to even ask about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, whether the stuff with, if it's just him and Pacheco, if it might like Clyde in that same range at all with a high game total.
Maybe if you think he's going to get like all of McKinnon's pass work, if McKinnon's out, maybe he jumps up into that range, but Pacheco's been getting more of the carries the last couple of weeks. So it's probably just one of those situations where neither one is really going to do enough.
How much is Pacheco?
I guess you get leverage off of Mahomes stuff with them, but I don't know. They don't project especially well.
So Blender, you mentioned, so you talked about Jeff Wilson, your favorite. Who are your other, do you have any other super favorites? You mentioned Derrick Henry.
No, I want to go up. I believe that the highest ceiling running backs on the slate are Henry, Barkley, and Jacobs.
Okay.
So a lot of people are going to try to play these Pierce Kamara lineups, and they're going to play Henry or Barkley in those lineups instead of Tyreek Hill, right? And something like that. I'd rather play Tyreek Hill and those guys and then sacrifice at a running back position that's not Dameon Pierce. And then since I'm playing a cheap quarterback in a stack type of combination, I could afford both. I could probably afford 3 of these guys. And no other lineups could have these. It's just, what's the concession? You have to play a cheap running back. And they go, and people are going to look and go, okay, I can play a cheap running back. I can play Dameon Pierce at 6,300. I go, no, you need cheaper. You still need another $700 or $800. And then they look behind Dameon Pierce and they go, ugh, right? People just looking, how do I click on Jamal Williams? How do I click on Najee Harris? How do I click on David Montgomery? How do I click on Jeff Wilson Jr.? I'm going to click on him. I don't understand. I don't need 100 yards and 5 catches and 2 touchdowns. No, dude, give me 60 yards and fall in the end zone twice. And especially the running backs against the chalk. So like Wilson Jr. and David Montgomery. Like, dude, I want to be the one with 5% on David Montgomery when everyone's on Twitter tilting the rushing touchdown that that Fields didn't get, or the pass interference in the end zone on that Tyreek Hill pass that Jeff Wilson runs in for 1 yard. I want to be on the receiving side of that benefit, not on the side of the tilt.
Yeah, no, yeah, I feel you, and that's what Blender always loves to. Blender always loves to be the one that the one that's getting all the big action when everybody else is getting the big pain. I want to be
very clear. On the Blitz projections, they don't project that much differently. The difference between Dameon Pierce's projection, point per dollar wise, and these 5K ones you're sacrificing like 4 points. Like that, you're sacrificing 40 yards rushing. You're sacrificing, a catch or 2. Like it's not as ridiculous as it sounds. So, and if Pierce only puts up 15 points, who cares?
We haven't mentioned Travis Etienne specifically, Cardi. How into the Blitz or how into Etienne is the Blitz this week?
He's viable. It kind of sees him a tier below Pierce, Kamara, Henry, which are kind of like the 3 best. I think there's lineups you can build with him that work. Especially on Fanduel. I like him a little more than DraftKings. Running back, though, I'm definitely playing Pierce in cash. And then I'm probably playing Kamara, maybe Henry instead of Kamara. If you can play all 3, great, but then you have to sacrifice Tyreek Hill. So, I probably prefer 2 of the running backs and Tyreek rather than all 3. But, again, it's a week where it's not clear-cut. But that's kind of like the cash approach at running back. You're playing 2 or 3 of Pierce, Kamara, Henry, Etienne, and those are the only cash viable ones, I think.
All right. Well, speaking of Tyreek Hill, Blender, unless you have any final words at running back, we can have you forever hold your peace, and we can move on to wide receiver and just start with Tyreek Hill. Cardi, is he a priority?
Yeah, he's the best wide receiver play on the slate. Once you consider price and projection, he's the best wide receiver play on the slate. I want to get there. But it's not like you have to get him, because it's not easy to get him. It's not extremely difficult, but it's not easy. He's being treated like a true alpha this year. Like with KC, he was never treated like a true alpha. He's getting like Cooper Kupp target shares this year. And he's got a really good quarterback throwing to him. Tua is an elite quarterback at this point, I feel like, or close to it. So I like him. I want to get there. It's just a matter of finding a way to do it. And I will say, if Matthew Stafford goes, Cooper Kupp is a guy I probably prioritize, maybe even over Tyreek. But if it's Wolford, then it's not.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I haven't heard obviously who doesn't want to play Cooper Kupp, right? But I'm looking at the ownership percentages, 7.1%. People are just freaked out because they think it might be, and
even if it's Wolford,
I love Cup and GPPs. I'm sure Blender's going to have a bunch of Cup in those types of lineups where you're doing the cheap stuff and you can spend up on whatever. Like you have a bunch of Cup, I assume.
I mean, is that true, Blender? Are you gonna? Or I mean, I didn't hear you mention Cup earlier.
I'm considering it. I'm not as high. It really depends on what the ownership comes in at. To me, compared to ownership, my top wide receiver play is Devontae Adams at 8,700.
Jamino has Justin Jefferson at 2.7%.
Well, I like
that's pretty wild, man.
I like, especially if people are gonna. I'm gonna bet. See, this is what we have to. This is what we do in DFS. Identify high variance situations. Identify fragile projections. Yes, the Blitz is, I believe, the best NFL projection system there is out there, but it's just a range of outcomes. And there's fragility in, well, we have to give a median perspective of what we think the teams are going to do in order to project that range of outcomes. But there are high variance situations. So just like what Cardi said with the Rams, well, how is this Rams offense going to operate with Wolford? Maybe it's just Wolford targets Cup like 22 times.
Well, that's all Stafford does.
Right, but I'm just saying, how is that effect? Yeah. We don't know. And right. I take a look at Case Keenum. If you just took out Case Keenum, I believe is probably the best backup quarterback in all of football. He's better than half the starting quarterbacks in football as it is. So if the Bills play as if they're playing like the Bills, the field from an ownership perspective is acting as if, oh, the Bills are going to be 60% run. Why play Diggs? Why play Keenum? Why play this game? If the ownership was the opposite of dude, all in on the Bills, let's go. It doesn't matter. Case Keenum, 5K cash games. Let's go. Then I'd be thinking the other side, going, maybe it's not going to be like that. But based on the ownership I see here, dude, Keenum plus Diggs and Jefferson run back, and then you know what? In order to play that lineup, you have to play a cheap running back. You plug in Jeff Wilson. People look at your lineup. You go, wow, this lineup looks really screwed up. And I go, yeah, I'm trying to win a GPP. But it's not. It looks screwed up. But if you just go by the projections, it's really not as far down as you think. You're not sacrificing as much projection. This is a week where most of the players are within 1 point of their salary adjusted value. Most players, right? Okay, we have if I look in the Blitz from a skill position standpoint, so running backs and wide receivers, there's only 3 players that have more than over 1.3, 4 over +1, and the highest is 4, and that's Tyreek Hill, and he has a 25-point projection. So 4 is only less than 20% off his median. So the salary adjusted value of these players, unless there's some big news that happens, any lineup that you make that spends $50,000 in salary most likely doesn't project all that much different than a lot of other lineups. You may be giving up some in ownership or not. So it's not as weird to say Keenum plus Diggs plus Jefferson. It's not weird to say, well, instead of playing Tyreek Hill, I'll play Cooper Kupp. The difference in their projection is 1.5 points. Why is one twice as owned as the other? It shouldn't be that way. So, that's how I have to think about this. So I look through all these receivers and I go, this ownership should be much more balanced than what it's going to be. So why not play Adams or Kupp over Hill if Hill's going to be twice as owned? It seems so obvious to me, but also understand that Tyreek Hill has a ceiling. Just Hill. I don't mind playing chalk Derrick Henry either. I don't mind playing chalk Saquon Barkley. These are guys that could put up enough points where you need to have them. I don't think Dameon Pierce is it. I don't think Christian Kirk as chalk is oh my God, he could put up 45 points. Do I want to play Mac Hollins at 15% ownership? Probably not. Amon-Ra St. Brown with his current ADOT. How much upside is he going to kill me?
We've seen Christian Kirk go off for 40 burgers. I know it was just earlier this season. We've seen Mac Hollins do it, but I get your point, and I'm not going to take us off the rails about Case Keenum being the best backup in the league, but I think that's kind of overstating it a little bit. He's a very, very competent backup. But
come on, he's better than half the quarterbacks that are currently starting.
I don't think he's better than Jacoby Brissett.
I don't think Brissett is that bad, though.
Yeah, well, I know, but
Is he better than Sam
Jacoby
Ellinger?
Brissett is a backup, Blender. He's just having to play right now.
But Brissett could start on the Colts.
Well, right, but I'm saying he's a backup and he's better. Like, this is a sports talk. Like, that's a sports talk topic for like AM radio. We need to talk DFS. The other guys here as we kind of move down, I think, Cardi, at least when I'm making my builds, when I'm trying to get in either a Saquon or a Derrick Henry plus a Tyreek Hill and cash, it's really hard. And I need to come down here to this kind of Juju Smith-Schuster, Christian Kirk sort of area here to sort of get my anchor wide receiver. And I'm not sure how much I like that particular roster construction. And I'm not sure if that's going to be, is that kind of a typical one? Like, how does the general roster construction look as far as what the Blitz is doing? If it does get up to a Tyreek Hill and it does manage to pay up a little bit, even to like a Kamara plus a Dameon Pierce, what are we looking at as far as the range of these other guys that we're kind of, getting in here? Because I'm imagining that it's going to have a third wide receiver that's down here in this Donovan Peoples-Jones, Mac Hollins, Marquez Valdez-Scantling range. Am I about right as to kind of what it's doing?
Yeah, it's a little all over the place. It's not like anybody is a guy that you have to jam in. Like Blender said, like everybody is kind of efficiently priced. The ones that are showing up the most are like Kirk, Juju. That's the fastest paced game on the slate. They're both going to get, like 20% target shares and good offenses. So they're good. I think there are some other guys in that range that people are going to play that I'm not considering at all. Like I'm not playing Deontay Johnson or like that type of guy. I'll play Kirk or I'll play Juju. I'll play Amon-Ra, or I'll go down and I'll play cheaper guys. I'll play Mac Hollins. I'll play Zay Jones. I'll play Peoples-Jones. Those are kind of the guys that are in my pool. And it's just a matter of fitting them together. And again, I haven't found a lineup yet that I'm like, yeah, that looks great. All those pieces fit great together. That I'm comfortable with. I haven't found that yet, but those are the guys that are kind of in the mix.
You know what? If that's what I'm thinking, and that's what the Blitz is thinking, that's what's going to be chalk. I just know it is. And so, Blender, that leaves to me a whole area here of guys like Waddle and Hopkins and like that are just completely off of my radar. Like you're doing the Jack Nicholson nod. What do you think? Can you talk about guys you might like in that range?
Right. If you're not going to pay up at quarterback,
mm-hmm.
and you're going to pay down and save. I mean, just literally saving 600 at running back does you a lot. If you're going to be punting a tight end, I do not mind 2 tight end lineups in GPP this week either. Like, I don't think the ceilings necessarily of some of these 4K 40 wide receivers are necessarily all that different from the 3K tight ends. So like, if I could save $1,500 and play 2 tight ends, and then I don't have to play any. Then I could just start.
That's a good point, Blender. That's a pretty good point, man.
I don't think this is
you're
that
sharp
high
moves
scoring
sometimes.
of a week.
No. It's
Imagine Alex. Imagine playing a lineup.
Yeah.
Like, think of this. Imagine playing a lineup that you're playing Brissett, Amari Cooper, Harrison Bryant at tight end, with Tyreek Hill as a run back, and then in your flex spot, you're playing Foster Moreau for 3,200. Now you could play in your running back spot, you could play David Montgomery at 6K, pay up for either Henry or Barkley, and then you could still play like Devontae Adams in that lineup. You could still play like a 6K wide receiver. You could play anyone you want still in that lineup. And as long as none of these cheap 4K Donovan Peoples-Jones goes off for some 80-yard touchdown reception, like, you're screwed, right? If Zay Jones happens, if Mac Hollins, I get it. But I think a lot of people are going to be making these builds with these mid-4K wide receiver, George Pickens or Khalif Raymonds. I think I prioritize, I want to play as many people in my lineup that have 40-point ceilings. Because I don't think people could build, if you could get 3 guys that have 40-point ceilings in your lineup, those are the guys that you're going to need to have in order to win. can I eke out 12 points at a cheap tight end? Like that's may all be what I need. And can I eke out 14 points from Jeff Wilson Jr. when Damian Pierce only puts up 14 also or something, or Kamara only puts up 16? I'll have the money that other people don't have. So when Justin Jefferson has 38 points or Devontae Adams has 36 points and Tyreek Hill has 30 points, like you can't make those lineups. So like I want to make those types of lineups. And I'm not playing other players in the 4K range. I just want to get off of that construct. I think those types of constructions are going to be inevitable. And I just don't want to play those constructions.
It feels like for cash, Cardi's interested in getting up to Tyreek Hill, maybe Cooper Kupp if Matt Stafford is in. And then as far as kind of the mid-range, getting down here to this Juju Smith-Schuster, Christian Kirk type of area around the 6K, 5,900 type of spot. And then what that's going to do is going to make you get down here to these guys, the Khalif Raymonds, the DPJs, Donovan Peoples-Jones, guys like Mac Hollins and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Cardi, is there anybody else you want to touch on before we've kind of talked a lot about, I think people are going to know what we're going to say about tight end, but is there anybody else you want to talk about? Any plays on the periphery of acceptability that you just wanted to shout out before we move on?
Not in cash, but certainly in GPPs. We've mentioned them even a little bit earlier in the show, like the Amari Cooper type plays that people aren't going to have, either in Dallas stacks or even just
Blender's going to have him. I can tell by the way he's been talking.
Did I say Amari Cooper?
Yeah.
I think Cooper's fine, but I actually meant to say CeeDee Lamb.
Okay.
I guess Cooper too, both of them. Like they're the guys that are going to have the high target shares, that are going to be, that have that ceiling. Michael Pittman. I know Blender doesn't like Ellinger, but like I think Indy stacks with Pittman or Pittman on his own. Like, I don't know. I still think there's some upside there. All
right. Blender, you have anything else on wide receiver before we move to tight end?
Nope. Let's go to tight end, my favorite position.
All right. This week, you love them so much, you want to stick in two of them. And, it does kind of make sense to me because, here I am just, I'm trying to close my eyes and figure, okay, on Sunday in my cash lineup, what will make me happy out of Donovan Peoples-Jones? And I'm just thinking, like, if he gives me 14 points or something like that, and it's not a snowflake, I'm going to be fine. And are you telling me that that's out of the range of outcomes for Dalton Schultz or Foster Moreau, or just like, so it does. I mean, what you're saying makes some good sense. I just, like I said,
would you be shocked if Pat Frymuth had 12 points?
No, of course.
No, so what's would you be shocked if Mike Gesicki catches a touchdown instead of Tyreek Hill and he has 10 points?
I wouldn't be shocked. I'm never going to play Gesicki though, man. That's it. But yeah, I get what you're saying,
Alex. For tight ends, what people don't seem to realize is that, and I'm not saying the tight end position, but I'm talking about the salary floor. That a 4K tight end to a 3K tight end is 25% of the salary of that position, right? So when you play a $2,500 tight end instead of a $5,000 tight end, you're saving 50%. That's like going down from a $8,000 receiver to a $4,000 receiver. And imagine me telling you the difference of like, would you rather play? So like use this Slate for an example. If you were to go down from Tyreek Hill, and then instead of Tyreek Hill, you played Zay Jones, right? You would say that's kind of a dramatic difference. Like, yeah, I probably want Tyreek Hill because I think Tyreek Hill is worth at least double what Zay Jones is. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the same thing, a tight end of like, well, instead of playing, let's say Michael Pittman, you're playing Dalton Schultz, right? Like, yeah. Probably the wide receiver is more, but is it double? I mean, like it should these guys be 3,300, 3,400? If the salary floor tight end was 4K and not 2,500, then we'd be much more inclined. It'd be similar to Fanduel, where you're more likely where the salary floor, the difference between the top tight end and the bottom tight end isn't as dramatic. So you have to think you can't think that it's the tight end position. You have to think that you have the ability to play a guy that should be 4K at 3K. And you have the ability to possibly do that twice on a slate that has very efficient pricing in and of itself to fit in more high ceiling players.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And let me just stick with you, Blenders, real quick before, because I feel like Cardi will be able to kind of blast through these what the best plays are. But just from a tournament perspective, what about playing Kelsey? Given all the other factors on the slate, given the nuance that you've laid out as far as the tight end position and the landscape, what about playing Kelsey?
I'll play Kelsey in the flex, and I'll still play another tight end. So
Okay.
the thing about Kelsey, remember, everyone has to play a tight end. So like if Kelsey, the only way that Kelsey is relevant is if he puts up so much more significant points than any other tight end on the slate. If Kelsey's sitting there with 29 points and most of these 3K tight ends have 8, well, everyone has to have at least 8 points at tight end, which means they're missing out on another 21 points because like everyone, you can't not play a tight end. So you have to weigh the probability of Kelsey outscoring every other tight end by so much that he's going to be necessary. If you don't think that that's the case, then Kelsey is just like any other of these he's like a $7,800 wide receiver otherwise. So Kelsey, I don't mind playing as a one-off. Obviously playing with Mahomes probably makes more sense. But to me, it's not a priority on either side. And there's no way you could play him in cash games.
Right. Okay. Cardi. So back to cash games. Here are the guys that I have been considering that I've been messing around with. To some degree, Pat Freiermuth at 4,200, but I find myself needing to save money. And I get down to here where I'm looking at Dalton Schultz at 3,800. And I'm looking at Greg Dulcich at 3,400. I'm looking at Foster Moreau at 3,200. And then if I really, really need it, I've been messing around some with the 2,700. Harrison Bryant down here at 2,700. Of all those guys, clearly Greg Dulcich is the GOAT, and I love him. I can't believe the usage that he's been getting. But like you talk about Dameon Pierce at the Senior Bowl, I was yelling just as loud about Greg Dulcich, but I wasn't expecting it to come this soon, at the NFL level and to be used in such a dynamic way. What does the Blitz say about these guys? Does it have favorites among those? And am I correct in assuming that you're probably going to be paying down to one of those guys?
Yeah, definitely paying down for one of them. It's almost certainly going to be Foster Moreau. I think he's the best of them and the cheapest. But Dulcich and Schultz are really good. I think there's a decent chance I wind up with one of those in addition to Foster Moreau. Evan Engram is also like fine, I guess, not for cash, but like in GPPs, if you just want to mix it up, like he's fine. But yeah, that's tight end. Like it's Moreau, it's Dulcich, it's Schultz. Obviously Kelsey. You're not playing Kelsey in cash though, and that's kind of it. Like these are the guys that are some of the most underpriced guys on the slate. They're tight end and they're cheap, and people think it's gross, but like if it lets you afford to spend up for Tyreek Hill and Amon-Ra or Derrick Henry or I'm going to consider playing two of them. Okay,
fair enough. Blender, anything else on tight end? Or you?
No, it's a garbage position. We just it's a slate where it just dictates that it's garbage enough that we need 2 garbage cans.
Stacks. I talked about it earlier here for the Blitz survey. I talked about it earlier. My favorite stack is the Browns Dolphins game. There's just a lot of plays there in that one that I like. And as Blender was saying earlier, if you do want to play Tyreek Hill, maybe an interesting way to do it is to just kind of pair it up with some pieces from over on the Browns side. But I'd be interested to hear from you guys about stacks that you're most interested in. Cardi, let's start with you.
So like the obvious stuff is like people are going to like stack KC, or they'll do, probably some Chicago, which I think is bad. You'll see Miami stacks, but the stacks that I think I have the most interest in are like, actually, I'm curious, Blender, are people going to play Vegas stacks? Because they're going to play Moreau. There's going to be Hollins. Like people aren't going to be like, oh, I'm playing Moreau and Hollins. Why don't I just stack this? And so you don't think the stacks are going to, so then
I think what's going to, okay. It depends on the field size. If you're playing large field, no. You're more likely to see those stacks probably in like a contest like the slant. Anyone that uses an optimizer will probably get Carr, Hollins, Moreau lineups. The problem is that if you set your lineups to like a 3+1, no one on Indy really projects all that greatly. So it may actually be even less than what you think. Like if you just do 3+0, yeah, you'll get Carr, Hollins, Moreau. You're going to get more Tyreek Hill lineups than Devontae Adams lineups.
Yeah.
You're going to get some systems have Dulcich actually projected higher than Moreau, and that $200 may make a difference. And also, people don't like playing Derek Carr. So like you almost have to. And on this slate, it's not like Carr doesn't show up. I mean, more likely you're going to see Fields too. I think so much ownership is going to be on those three quarterbacks that I don't even think the question like worrying about is Carr going to be too high owned. I don't think you have to worry. Whatever that is, maybe it's 2 percentage points higher, but it's nothing that should dictate I shouldn't play it because it's too high owned.
Good. So then Vegas, then if that's how it's going to play out, then Vegas is probably my favorite stack. But I think you can also think about doing like Jacksonville. I think is good. You know, I think they'll see a little ownership, or probably a similar thing to Carr, where like you're not going to full stack with Lawrence. You'll just see some ownership, like on Kirk and maybe Jones or whatever. So I like Jacksonville. I like the Giants. I like Cleveland. I like Indy. You know, that kind of gross stuff, like the gross Buffalo, or even LA. I think is interesting.
What do you think, Blender? What do you think, bro?
If I were to rank my stacks, and this is stacks versus ownership.
Okay.
So it's not about raw points.
Got it.
Number 4 would be Trevor Lawrence. Only and primarily because of ownership, because you're going to probably have to play Christian Kirk, and he's going to be double-digit owned, and you're going to have Juju or Kelsey, and they're going to be owned. So, like, I like that from a raw points perspective, but not as much from an ownership perspective. Number 3, I would put is Carr, and we talk Carr, Adams. I prefer Adams over Hollins, right, to avoid that 4K range. So you play Carr, Adams, and Moreau. And number 2 would be Case Keenum. Keenum, Diggs, Knox type of lineup, right? You put in that tight end. No one's going to play Dawson Knox, and who says he can't score? I mean, in that 3K range of tight end, anyone could do well. And number 1 is Jacoby Brissett. Brissett plus Cooper plus Bryant and a Tyreek Hill or Waddle bring back. I have no problem 3+2ing that lineup. You do Brissett plus Cooper. People are going to be playing Peoples-Jones as a value in a lot of lineups. Don't use Peoples-Jones just in that lineup with Hill. Also play Jeff Wilson at 5,500. So you get the receiving yards from Hill, you get the touchdowns from Jeff Wilson. You have a nice 3+2. That you're playing a chalky game, but you're definitely not playing it in a chalky way.
Cool. All right, man. I love that one too. All right, so let's get to conviction and consequences. First, let's give a shout out to the Blitz listener / viewer from last week that joined the 5-man. I think it's Bookie Priest, and he nuked us in week 8, and so he got to come back in week 9. Fortunately, we didn't let the listeners win 2 weeks in a row. But man, if somebody sticks around and gets a win versus me, Cardi, Will, and producer Steve, they certainly deserve a shout out. So shout out Bookie Priest, man. Good job. I think this week we have a new listener on. So best of luck to him or her. We're going to now talk about our consequences, which is Will for last week. He got 5th place. He's going to get assigned a quarterback in the 5-man. Any early thoughts that you have about this? I wonder how much he likes Malik Willis. If he's a big Malik Willis fan. I don't
think Willis is going to play. I think we're getting Tannehill.
Is that too mean?
Tannehill going to play?
Yeah. Well,
I thought Tannehill's likely to play.
Yeah, I think so. Well, from Jim Wyatt says that it feels like everything points to him trending in the right direction. I'm just trying to look down, like Davis Mills. We could give him. I don't want to give him Trevor Lawrence.
I mean, Davis Mills is probably a pretty bad one. If we want to be a little nicer, maybe it's like a Kenny Pickett or something like that.
Give him the best backup Give him the best backup quarterback in the league.
I was going to say Keenum is actually.
I want Will to beat Alex, even if he doesn't come in first with Case Keenum in his lineup, because he talked crap about him.
I didn't talk crap about him. I just said he's not the best backup in the league. It's just not
Who's
true.
the best backup in the league?
Jacoby Brissett's better.
All right, it's Case Keenum. We're gonna do it.
All right. Case Keenum, that's your quarterback, Will. All right, so he's Derek Carty. You can find him on Twitter at Derek Carty. You can find the Blitz at rotogrinders.com/the-blitz. You can pull it into lineup HQ. You can do whatever you want with it. Even if you're playing tournaments, like Blender was saying earlier, you can put in your weird stacks and just have the Blitz build around it. It's an awesome system, awesome tool to use. rotogrinders.com/the-blitz. Of course, he is Blender, Mr. Jordan Cooper. You can find him on Twitter at BlenderHD. You can hear him on the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports podcast, a great podcast that I'm a listener of. Also, he has his courses, one of which I've taken, the other of which I have not taken. But once the season's over, I have it queued up and ready to go. Certainly, very, very, very helpful there. Again, that's at BlenderHD on Twitter. My name's Alex Dunlap. You can find me on Twitter at Roster Watch. You can listen to me on Saturdays, Sirius XM, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, and on the Roster Watch podcast. All my content is at rosterwatch.com. All right. Conviction plays, boys. And now we know Blender doesn't have a conviction play, but it can.
No, I got a conviction this week.
All right, let's hear
it. Damian Pierce is not on the Millie lineup on either Fanduel or DraftKings.
Very fair take, Cardi.
It's tough because there isn't a player that really sticks out. Like in cash, Damian Pierce is your first guy in. In GPPs, he's terrible. I'm going to say my conviction is that 2 tight ends is viable in any format this week.
Viable? That's not a take. Viable. When you have to say 2 tight end lineup wins the Millie. That would be
all right, fine. 2 tight end lineup wins the Millie. There you go.
Okay. Now look, man, I'll be kind of like a mix. I'll be like a mix of what you guys said, man, because Cardi's talking about the first guy in his lineup, and the first guy that I put in my lineup is somebody that is not in a position that I ever care much about, and it's one we've talked a lot about. It's about tight end. But dude, at 3,400, it was just so simple. I open up DraftKings for my cash lineup. I click on Greg Dulcich. First player in, man. The absolute GOAT, Greg Dulcich. He will be in my cash game lineup against you guys. So for Cardi, for Blender, for our producer Steve, I am Alex. This has been the Blitz Week 10. We're getting the hell out of here.